Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a very special episode that we have for you today. You guys seem to enjoy our previous collaboration, so we brought another really cool up-and-coming YouTuber in the Overwatch space. As you can tell, it is WOL. So I just want to quickly say thank you, WOL, for coming on. I'm one of your hosts, Spencer. With me is Chris, and specially joined is WOL. So WOL, why don't you give everybody a little bit of an introduction with yourself and tell everybody about, the sort of content that you create and how you got started in the space and all those fun things.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem.
Looking forward to it. So hey guys, I'm WOL. I've been making competitive Overwatch related content for over a year and a half now. Anything from Overwatch League, a couple of vids on Contenders, Overwatch World Cup. You enjoy that sort of thing, sort of videos I make. So if you want, come check me out.
Yeah, and there. So first of all, I just want to say they're really good content. Like I've been watching you for quite some time. That's how I initially found you. And the first sort of videos from you that I did start watching were actually the World Cup going into last year. I know some people got a little bit cold on the World Cup by the end, but I don't know about you. But I mean, obviously you covered it, but I was always like super excited, right? Obviously, Team Canada, we had some success in the past. I was always a really big fan of the World Cup, and it really pains me. That we're not going to get it this year. But I guess I sort of wanted a little bit of...
Has that been confirmed?
No, but I mean, like,
it's basically all but confirmed at this point.
Yeah, given the pandemic and whatnot, I don't see a way in which we bring people from like 32 separate countries into one LAN event, right? Like, there's just no way that that's feasible. But yeah, so that's actually how I discovered you. So I mean, I guess I wanted to give you a little bit of thoughts on sort of the World Cup and how that went and why you were so attracted to sort of like really grind that content, because you're like, some people are like, oh, here's my top 5, here's my top 10. I remember you had like a top 48 or something crazy like that, where you had like a lot of different teams. So I just want to hear your perspective from like the content side of things, as well as just like your general interest.
Yeah, so I mean, the World Cup for me, I've obviously been following competitive Overwatch since it really began. And obviously the first year was a bit of sort of a content creator mess with even players like Muselk and Stylosa getting involved. But sort of every year after that, I always thought the World Cup was just a really fun event where you got to see really high-level competitive Overwatch, but in a setting that almost had a bit more sort of fan interaction and just seemed a bit more supportive, I guess, with everyone sort of representing their own nations and that sort of thing. In terms of content for it, we're surprised to see not many people actually just made much content for it outside of just a couple of videos. So I thought I'd just have some fun with it. Ended up having a bit too much fun making who should make which rosters for about 20 different countries, including countries like Brazil and Ireland. Although Ireland their social media was great, so that was great.
They were.
And then I was an idiot and decided to make a power rankings for every team that was confirmed to take part, which ended up a complete mess. Although I was generally right with it.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, obviously it worked out. Like, I mean, you've over like 5,000. You just hit 5,000 subscribers, right? So I mean, first of all, congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, cheers to that. I just hit that yesterday, so that was quite cool.
And do you attribute, like, how much did you really grow during that time? Because I remember I was watching all of your videos. Like, I never heard of you up until that point. And then I was like, Chris and I did our power rankings, right? We did like our top 10 because, like, I don't know the Brazilian Overwatch team. I'm not going to pretend like I do, right? I barely know the US Overwatch. That's not true. But I knew the big ones. But I was like, yeah, I want to learn some more about some of these other countries. So I watched your stuff sort of before we did ours. So, I mean, like, how successful was that? Did you notice a lot of growth during it? Was it just purely out of like passion and whatnot?
Yeah. So the World Cup was huge. I mean, I'd been covering the Overwatch League. So I started sort of making videos during season 2 of OWL and saw some steady growth there. Was sort of talking a lot to ATP at the time, another Overwatch League content creator. He saw a lot more growth during the league at that time, whereas I still saw growth, but not sort of as rocketing. And then as soon as I started making, I don't know what it was. I think the big thing about the World Cup really is that you get a lot of Overwatch players who don't necessarily follow the Overwatch League, but are just drawn to the Overwatch World Cup as just sort of something they can more easily rally behind.
Yeah.
Having sort of you don't need to have that sort of Apex knowledge or that old Overwatch Contenders knowledge that a lot of sort of Overwatch League fans have. And instead they just, they saw their country on screen and were like, okay, that's the team I'm rooting for. Those are the players I'm going to go and support. And I think because of that, just a lot a lot more people were sort of interested in the Overwatch World Cup, and sort of during that time, I saw, well, and today, I think they're still my best videos in terms of views and support and people enjoying them. And I mean, overall, I thought last year was a pretty good event overall, outside of a couple of sort of technical things in terms of how they ran it. But outside of that, I think in terms of how people received it generally, I think it was a pretty good event.
I love the World Cup. No, you go, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was kind of a need for a World Cup event material. I mean, like before we started doing interviews with coaches and players and stuff, our best video was from the World Cup too. And we didn't do nearly the work you did. Like, so definitely that's a good thing from there. So I mean, okay, so just quickly on the World Cup from last year, I guess. What was your favorite team apart from your home country's team?
Yeah, so obviously outside of UK, it's again very biased. It's going to be the Netherlands. Actually, got to speak to some of the members on their team and also people behind the scenes like Miss Facility, who's an incredibly nice person. Yeah, I just fell in love with just how they played. The players I've been watching in Contenders, because I watch a lot of Contenders EU, so a lot of their roster was built around that sort of those Contenders EU players. Yeah, and also they were just a team that, from just talking to people as well, got to speak to a couple of players behind the scenes, but they were also a team that sort of surprisingly did well in early scrims, and obviously we saw during the World Cup itself, they were one of the sort of surprise sort of nations at it in terms of their performance and getting to the final 8 and all that sort of stuff. And actually, was it final 6 actually?
Yeah, they did really well.
But either way, yeah, they did really well. They had a great social media. Again, a bit of bias as the person who made my logo actually was also their sort of designer as well, sort of. So
that's
I
awesome.
had a lot of reason to support them. And they were all lovely people. And I was so happy.
I can't blame you for that one. I think I remember watching the World Cup, and Facilities was actually just dangling on agilities.
Yeah, which was surprising.
I don't know if they beat us.
They did. No, they did beat us. Well, to be fair, was that the one game that we... No, it wasn't. Yeah, they actually beat us. I was going to say that was one game where XQC was streaming, but it wasn't. That was versus Russia where he was streaming. But yeah, no, Facilities, like, generally, they, like, outplayed us, man. I was not like, we were so mad after that Team Canada performance, because like I take it like a little bit seriously, like as a fan, and I wish like people took it not like as seriously as the Overwatch League, but I feel like some people just sort of showed up and just played because like, oh, it's just for fun. But like I liked when it's like a little bit more competitive. The World Cup was actually the first Overwatch competitive match I ever watched. I think it was like the 2017 one.
Yeah,
that's when I started following
Same
Overwatch,
here,
or 2016, whichever one.
It was probably 2017.
Yeah, that was the first one I watched, and I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, fucking, let's go Canada, right? Like, let's get it. And I do remember, like, the power rankings, I did die on the hill that Team USA was the #1 team. So that's always my like claim to fame. Everybody was picking Korea, and I was like, no, Team USA is going to be the one to win it this year, and of course they did. I think the best part too about Overwatch World Cup is not only that you get this sort of like Olympics vibe where everybody like roots for their country, which I always love. It's one of my favorite parts of sports and esports, in general. But I also just love the like random Cinderella stories and the random talent that just emerges, right? Like FD God had an amazing performance, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to watch him in the Overwatch League, and then boom, he pops off, right? Now it goes both ways, where you see some other people have some really, really good performances, and I don't want to knock a guy when he's down, but like Brisson, for instance, from the Dutch team, and he comes into the league and maybe doesn't pop off the way some people had initially thought. But those are always sort of my favorite moments, where it's like you get to like see individual players who you never really seen compete against the best and sort of how they perform.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's also another thing I really enjoyed about sort of the preparation videos I did for it, whereas I was looking at teams of the power rankings, was going to see sort of either like Contenders South America VODs or Contenders Australia VODs, and just seeing these players. I mean, some of them it's really a shame they haven't actually or never did make the jump to the league. I remember Russia's I think it's Xiao or Tao. I can't remember the exact pronunciation of the name. The off tank for Russia.
The off tank, the tank.
Yeah, no, he was really impressive when Russia made that big run, and also in the years since. Also, there was a player called Signed, who I think is now retired from Overwatch, from New Zealand, I believe, or Australia. Either way, he was from Australian Contenders and was absolutely popping off there. You got players like those who just you would never even know about, hear about, unless you've got people within those regions telling you about them. and yet you see them on the big stage and they just completely pop off and sort of just wow you with their ability.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely some great parts about Overwatch World Cup. Now, obviously, you know what, Canadian Overwatch podcast. So we would be lying. We have to touch on the Canadian team. And hey, you know what? I will argue you guys about whether or not Overwatch World Cup will be on this year. But let's say it is. Our past team was XQC, Note, Agility, Surefour, Mangachu, Crimzo, Banny. This goes to both of you guys, to be honest. Do you see that changing? What are your guys' thoughts on perceived new team?
Yeah. So what you're saying is, if the World Cup had happened this year, well, we got the expert on from the World Cup, WOL, the guy who's been watching, New Zealand contenders footage to do his research on Team Brazil and Team New Zealand, Team Australia. So, somebody who knows what he's talking about. We'll bring it to you, the guest. If Team Canada had their roster this year, what would be your 2020 Team Canada World Cup Overwatch League roster?
Oh, you have put me on the spot here. I mean, I think a big thing to start with is that I think with Canada last year, I think showed that lots of the players weren't it's not that they didn't want to be there, but they wanted to be there more for the fun of it than for the competitive nature of it. I mean, I don't think you'd see players like Surefour or XQC actually want to do it, whether or not they're good enough to do it. I mean, I would say absolute locks for the team. Crimzo, I would say. He probably still notes. I mean, looking at main tank, you'd probably go Shredlock now, given his experience in the league. It's from that point, it's then hard to say. It's whether Mangachu would actually want to play, given he's been more of a coach lately. Is that right?
Yeah.
On Toronto.
Yeah, he's been coaching.
Yeah, same with Agilities, whether he would want to come back.
So let's just for this fun, let's just say people want to come back. Obviously, because it's like, I mean, it makes it so much more difficult if you're trying to judge whether a person's mental is in it or not. Like, I kind of just wanted to get assuming everybody's down, hypothetically, of course, that this is going to go down, and everybody's like into it, and they're motivated too, right? Because I do agree that one of the issues Team Canada had last year was some people were just like, I think we had like a week's practice and we just showed up and tried to win, and it was like, oh, some teams are like legitimately scrimming and taking this seriously, and I don't think we were one of them. So assuming everybody's there and they're motivated, I want to hear who you sort of had in mind, because I totally agree about Shredlock. I think XQC is definitely sort of moved past Overwatch. He's way too big for it, right? He plays too many games. His stream's too successful. I do think Note. I think I actually want to ask you maybe like Note versus Icy, because I think Icy's the only other. I was going to
say Icy's the one who.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I think last year they made the mistake of picking Note.
I agree.
He who shall not be named.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say this would have been a different conversation had some other stuff not happened, but they did.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, the issue that I have with Note is that, and from everything I've seen, he's a really, really lovely guy, and I have nothing against him. I just think after Boston, on Dallas, he's really shown, and even during those trials for last year, and this was the biggest issue I had with the selection of Note, was that he's only really good enough on Diva, and now I would also say Sigma.
Yes.
I would say his Hog is a bit lacking, and his Zarya, for me, hasn't been good enough at all. So, also after playing him now, was he there the year before? I know he was there obviously last year.
I think he was there the year before, when they were running 5. XQC, Monkey, Note, Diva.
Yeah, I mean, having been in there twice before, I'd also almost be wanting to give Icy the go this time.
Yeah.
Given that he's been doing pretty well in contenders, and
And they were second win, weren't they? Icy. No, Icy was third impact. Sorry, but keep going.
Yeah, Icy was third impact. Yeah, so he'd be one to certainly probably put his name into the hat.
I think so. Yeah. I don't fully disagree. And I actually, when I was watching the trials, I was surprised that they picked Note. I thought he was outplayed. I actually thought that shouldn't have been the case, but it was. I think the problem with Icy is it's a little bit similar to Note, whereas I actually don't think Icy's Diva is elite. A lot of people are like, hey, you got to go look for Icy. You know what I mean? He should be. So like, people are saying we should pick up Icy for the Toronto Defiant this year. And his Sigma is definitely elite. Like, I think his Sigma is Overwatch League level. I do have concerns about his Diva, especially since he is somebody who hasn't really played that OG sort of dive style from like 2017. He doesn't have those reps in at an elite level. And I think that note did show that while initially his other hero pool isn't as deep, right? He definitely his D.Va was his strongest hero. I think throughout the season, the growth I've seen on Sigma leads me to believe that if it ever does become like a Zarya meta, Hog's a little bit different, but let's say a Hog meta too, where he can put in the work and grind the hero enough to improve. Because by the end of the year, I thought his Sigma was actually pretty good. So I would end up taking note, I think, based around the fact that I think obviously Sigma and D.Va are his best heroes, so who knows what the meta is going to be, but that sets you up pretty well for most off-tank sort of requirements. And while his Zarya right now probably isn't good enough, you'd like to think that if, let's say you knew that was meta and you gave him like a 3 weeks, for instance, to learn the hero, 4 weeks to grind the hero, he can sort of elevate it to that status. Because obviously in 2016, 2017, 2018, all off-tanks had to do was play D.Va, right? Like that was really the only off-tank that was sort of meta for such a long time. So that would be my pick, although Icy would be a good shout.
Yeah, I think
that's a pretty comprehensive.
Well, I would take it seriously. I told you, I take the World Cup. I take it seriously. Well, also Icy I looked into because when we did our like preview show over like what the roster should be, because there are people who say that like Toronto should pick up Icy. Obviously he's Canadian. Obviously he's seen a lot of success on Third Impact. I don't think it's a bad call. I think he'd be like your second option that you maybe try to develop. I don't know if you pick him up and just throw him into a starting role. I think that might be a little bit risky, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's definitely an option too. I mean, what also, in terms of the XQC replacement, obviously Shredderlock probably going to be the one to pick. I feel like they should look at False as well on the Boston Uprising contenders team. Mm-hmm. They've been doing fairly well. They've gotten like third for like the past 4 or 5 events. Had a couple first and seconds a year ago. So not doing too bad either.
I think those are like the open trials, though. I don't think they've actually performed when it came to the actual NA contenders. They usually make it through, but then they lose in like the first round.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, looking at NA contenders, Farron Fear might be a shout if there was a trials position. He played on Noble during the last NA contender season, and Noble did have a decent lower bracket run. I think they came 4th overall. Mm-hmm. I think maybe even losing to Square One, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think I remember him being a main tank, so he's someone who could... Well, I think he's someone who should be invited to some sort of tryout or trials position, for sure, if there was one.
And I think...
So one other...
Sorry, go, Chris. I was going to say the DPS is probably who we should move on to, because that's the most interesting one to me.
Is it? I don't think it is.
I feel like it's just like... The DPS is interesting if sort of the 3 main ones don't want to do it. It's sort of... Your big question, really.
I think there's I think Agilities gets it because you never know if you need a Genji or a Doomfist or a Pharah. The problem is I really think Razor deserves a legitimate look because he's performed so well for Third Impact, which is now Drifters, I believe. Yeah. And he had performed really well for Revival too. And I know he's like an up and coming talent. I believe he's turning 18 this year, so I think he's eligible, but he's another person who I think should get a look. Like, I think that even if Mangachu wanted to play, and there's no disrespect to Mangachu or even like Agilities, but I think on certain heroes, you might actually see Razor be fielded. Like, I generally think he's like a pretty good player. The problem is, like, I think you'd have to pick Surefour. Like, at this point, I don't think there's any way around it, even though I think he had like a bit of a rocky year this year for like multiple different reasons. I think he just wanted to stream by the end of it. Is there another hit scan though that you'd want to look at going into like other contenders players? Because I think that's where it's like I'm just not familiar enough with the contender scene to really start to pick apart like up and coming Canadian hit scan prospects.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but that's sort of the beauty of why you have a trialing system, I guess. In a lot of these cases, it's during the sort of that trialing system where you see sort of people upcoming who could really pop off. As I say, I don't think Shawful would actually want to do it, so you probably would have an easier fit for Razor to get in. And I personally would give him the shot anyway. I mean, you've got really sort of nothing to lose at this point.
Yeah,
might as well give him the opportunity on the stage.
I don't think Shawful
wants it.
Sorry, I don't think Shawful is going to come back. Like, honestly, took it pretty easy like last year. Realized that everybody's kind of going hardcore. That the fans also kind of ripped on him. Now he's probably like, nah, I I don't want to try that.
But I think the World Cup would be the one thing he would want to do. Like, you saw XQC do it, right? XQC was so fucking done with Overwatch, but he still was like, I want to do the World Cup. Like, even Sinatra said if there was a World Cup, he'd come back to Overwatch and play if he was selected. Like, I feel like the World Cup is one of those things that players are like, you know what, it's fun, so I don't got to sit there like 9 hours a day and grind. And it's like a really, like, everyone's always talks about how like much fun it is to be at BlizzCon and playing with people from your country and stuff like that. I actually think Surf would be pretty motivated to do that.
Okay, well, hey, maybe. I think in the final position is like in the support, Crimzo, obviously. Here's a question: do you still try to go with Banny or like Rolf? Because obviously Banny, he's coaching Rolf. I know you guys aren't too high on him.
Well, Rolf's the flex support. I think you'd go Zolik for the main.
I was going to say Zolik actually. If you're going to go for our main support.
Yeah.
Drifters now, I believe.
Yeah.
That's where he's currently at.
Yeah, because when we had By Zenith on this show, he actually talked pretty highly of Zolik about like one, his leadership capabilities, but also two, his like overall play on like the Lucio and the Mercy and stuff like that. And he actually has a pretty good Baptiste, which is something like some main supports can't really flex to. We saw that a little bit this year with like Cruz, who I think struggled when he had to play the Baptiste. But Zolix is from what we've heard is actually pretty good. So I think you'd pick him over. I mean, obviously, if it's like on a Zen meta, like you'd probably go Rolf. Obviously, if it is a double flex support meta, that's probably the safer play. The issue is if you do need to play like a Lucio or you do need to play a Mercy, then I think Zolik has to be your guy.
Yeah. I mean, you could even be left with a position where Mangachu actually is Canada's coach. You have Agilities and Razor. You take Icy and Shredlock, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Zolik and Crimzo. And then, like last year, you then take a second flex support, really, in Rolf. So I guess you could try and fit both in.
The problem is with Razor, who would play the hit scan, though? Because Razor's
who knows at that point?
He's got to hope Razor's a god. He picked up Echo super quick. Can he pick up Ashe and McCree just as quick? Or maybe Agility's got that in his back pocket. I see he played Soldier for a little bit for some reason for the Defiant. So who knows? Anything's possible.
Yeah, anything's possible right